Hello viewing millions and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about these really very beautiful watercolours I've discovered recently by Lutea. They're a Belgian company. It's a one-woman band really. I mean, I know she has people who assist, but really really nice lady called Sylvie Godot does everything, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. They're located in rural Belgium. They really are a high-end brand. I think they've got quite a limited market because they're not really for everyone. They are for people who want interesting and unusual paints, I guess, or want to get a bit more back to nature. They're not a mass market product. Now, I bought for myself to try out, to review I should say. I bought from my business 3 colours because I wanted to review them. They come in 9mm tubes and I bought these from Jackson's in the UK about a month ago. And I bought the yellow, the purple and the orange, and I'll talk about all the colours separately in a minute. And I had a problem with the orange. I'm going to be very honest here because I think one of the bits of feedback I get again and again and again is that my honesty is what people really appreciate. The orange that I bought wasn't quite right. It was very dark and almost like a burnt sienna kind of brown, and I'll show it to you in a minute. So I got in touch with Sylvie and I said, look, I know there's obviously natural variation, these are natural products. Is this within the bounds of normal? And she looked at it and she said, do you know, I think that's a mislabeled tube. I think that's the dark orange that I sell, but I'll send you some tubes to make up for it. So she sent me 2 tubes of orange that she'd checked from different batches, that she'd checked and swatched and made sure they were within the bounds that the colour normally is. And I'd also said, look, you know, I have this channel on YouTube and I'd really like to review them. Could I have a spot card or something like that? She said, oh yeah, sure, I'll send you some samples. And I was really excited when this little package arrived for me from Lutea. I should just add, Lutea is, it's a Latin word. It's the feminine singular of the adjective that means the colour of saffron. Some people translate it as saffron yellow, but if we're going to be really strict, it just means the colour of saffron. But there isn't a saffron-based paint in Lutea's range, but you can mix a saffron-like colour, should you wish. So within this box, I was quite amazed when I opened it to find, let me just get you in focus, the entire range free of charge for me to review. There's 12 tubes in here. There were actually 13 because she sent me 2 oranges so that I could try different batches and make sure they were right. So I'm going to talk you through all of them. First, I won't just show you them as the tubes. I've got them swatched. I'll show you them. Then I'll talk a little bit more about what they can do and what they can't do because I've done some playing with them. And then I'll do some mixing wheels and I'll paint with them a little bit so you can see what they paint like. So I just want to show you the tubes first of all. They are 9mm tubes and they are really very pretty. And this at the top here is the actual pigment that's in that tube. I think it's probably in casein or egg tempera or something like that rather than in a watercolour matrix, but that's where they are. Now I have got the full details of the composition of these paints and I'll just tell you that they are gum arabic with honey. They have one of the standard industry standard antimicrobials in there, and then they have the pigment, and that's it. So, well, and oxgall, of course, there is oxgall in there, and glycerine. So, the oxgall levels, I can't actually remember off the top of my head here, actually, whether there is oxgall in there. I think if it is present, it's quite low levels, because adding a bit more gives them more flow. But I like that. I like to be able to control my paints. I don't really like the kind of core and mission gold, stupid levels of oxgall where the paint shoots across the page. I should have control over how much flow the paint has, and that's why you buy from the good brands bottles of oxgall and then you use it when you need it. You know, it hasn't got excessive amounts, and these don't have excessive amounts. So that's what they are. Now in terms of the pigments, they are what are called lake pigments, and I'm just going to explain the concept of lakes a little bit to you because this is almost like the colour chemistry series in a way, but I'll just explain it very, very, very quickly. And the way they work, well, the way a lake pigment kind of works, if you like, is lake comes from the old-fashioned word for lacquer, you know, the sense of something that is not water-soluble. And it's a way of turning water-soluble colours from living things like plants and so on into pigments that are not soluble that you can then use in a paint. So what you do is you take your natural item, a very deformed flower, and you extract it in some way. Now think about this. Think about if you make what usually you would call a herbal tea, you know, a tisane, an infusion of leaves or an infusion of flowers like raspberry and echinacea. That's a very common one. And you end up in your cup with a sort of pink tint to that liquid. You know, you've extracted some of the pigments, some of the anthocyanins in the case of raspberry have come out. Now, if you wanted to turn that into a paint, you have to concentrate it up first. So you concentrate it, and when you've concentrated it, you then add in a metal. I'm going to use M for metal, and it has to be a metal ion. That means a charged salt of the metal, if you like. So just to give you an example, for aluminium, or aluminum if you're in the USA, aluminium foil is the metal. Aluminium chloride that's in most antiperspirants is a salt of that metal. And aluminium chloride consists of AlCl3, so aluminium chlorine. And the aluminium has 3+ charge, and the chlorine has a minus charge, so 3 chlorines cancel that out. So if you add aluminium in the 3+ charge, what that does is it conjugates the pigments together and forms what we would call a lake in artistry. So just to give you an example, if we say that the coloured molecules that are in there, we can represent those by triangles, okay? They'll be big, complicated structures. And if we react them with some aluminium, what we might get is aluminium bound to 3 of those triangles. This will not be soluble. This will be much more light fast than this is, and it will be something that can be further processed, ground down, and turned ultimately into a paint. And with most of the colours, that is exactly what Anne Sylvie does. It's not universally the case, but that's with most of them. So I'll show you them swatched out. I'm just going to try and fan these out so that I can show you them together. They're a really interesting palette because they're quite interesting colours, and the origins are really interesting. And if you're into symbolism and all of that kind of thing in your paintings, these could be really cool to use. So there is the full Lutea range in all its glory. Now these were swatched out using clean water, and I did them with the there it is, the Icon 1/2" flat sable synthetic blend by Jackson's. It comes in a set. You can buy it on its own, but it comes in a set. I'll link that in. So if you, just so you know, if you're not familiar with my channel, if you go down there, video description, link to my website will show you how to buy these, how to buy all the other products I use, the paper and everything else in the video. It's usually at the bottom of the post with links to different vendors. And Jackson's, just to let you know, at the moment have got free international shipping on brush orders of £20, which is about $25–30, and about the same in euros or more, if you buy brushes only. So if you buy a couple of packs of brushes, nothing but brushes, you'll get free international shipping on them, which is an amazing deal anywhere in the world. That's really good for people who are in Australia, because I know you struggle with international shipping in particular, but Jackson's, I think, have been really canny about making sure they serve the international market, and they are a damn good company. They've got a really, really good selection of products at great prices. They're not paying me to say that. I have done some review of some products of theirs, but they have not paid me a penny from their own pocket. So I just genuinely like them as a company. I think they do a really good job of what they do. So let's go through these colours and I'll talk you through them. I just want to talk about light fastness first, because I know that's the thing that everyone's going to be like, well, they're flower pigments, how can they be light fast? Because lots of people then know about Rose Madder or whatever not being terribly light fast. Well, I'll tell you, these were all independently tested by a French company. I think it was Greening that did it, and they were tested on the blue wool scale system, which, to explain if you're not au fait with the blue wool system, that is where basically a card that is cut in half, that comes with a blue dye already impregnated on some wool, traditionally, you cut it in half, you paint out all your samples onto a certain surface, cut those in half, and then for each one you put half of them in a dark cupboard and half of them are exposed to light in a controlled laboratory with controlled temperature, controlled humidity and controlled lighting, and it is very precisely done. And then they basically look at, there's two ways of doing it. One is you can leave them for a really, really long time and compare them with a set of standards as to how much they fade. The other way to do it is to look at them at different intervals and see how long does it take before they start to fade. And that's the way that it's getting done a little bit more these days. And these paints all scored 5 or 6 on the blue wool scale, which goes up to 8. So if you think about the normal system we're probably all used to, the one that companies like Daniel Smith use, where they will say light fastness 1. So they will say light fastness 1, that's the top end for Daniel Smith, and 4 is the bottom end. For other companies, 4 is the top end and 1 is the bottom end. A lot of companies use a 4-point scale. If you take the blue wool scale, you can roughly approximate that a 6 on the blue wool scale is going to be about a 3 on that scale, where 4 is the top. So in the Daniel Smith version of it, it would be a 2 rather than a 1. On the other way round of doing it, where 4 is the best, they would be the equivalent of a 3. One of the colours is a 5, so I would say that's probably about a 2 to 3, somewhere in the middle of that scale. But they are all pretty good. None of them, incidentally, were tested for light fastness 8. The scale they were tested on only went up to 7, because to get light fastness 8, they had to be exposed for 2 years, and that experiment hasn't finished yet. So we'll see. Some of them may actually climb from 6 to a higher number, who knows. But that's what they are at the moment. So let's go through them. And I'll talk to you about the plants in a moment, actually. Let me just get my... I made some notes before I did this. Sorry, I just wanted to get my piece of paper that I'm going to show you in a minute, because I decided, because some of you I know are into the symbolism of the plants and what they're used for, I thought I'd talk a little bit about that as well in a minute. So, the first colour is rouge, or red, which is Lac de Garance, which is another way of saying Madder Lake. NR9 in the colour index. You can see it's quite a muted red. It's almost a red iron oxide kind of red. It's almost a Venetian red kind of red. This does look granulating, but that's because I put so much on. If you do thin washes, you do not get granulation. Remember, my swatches are on really crap hot press student grade paper, because I like to see the paints at their worst and not give you a false impression. Now, they are lake taken from Rubia tinctorum, which is the dyer's madder. Rubia is just red, and tinctorum coloured or impregnated, so it's just the red plant in Latin, I suppose. I'll actually go through the Latin names when I talk about the sort of symbology of the plants, I think. And if you look at madder, if you actually make an extract of madder, it has alizarin, it has purpurozanthin, it has quinazanthin, I can never say that one, quinazonin, and it has purpurin, lots of different pigments in it. And if you purify out alizarin and make a lake, you get alizarin crimson. If you just take the whole lot and make a lake, you get madder lake, and that's what this is. So it's a really very pretty colour, and that's the red. The next one is the pink, and this one actually dried a bit oddly, so the edges have got most of the colour. I think the paper kind of buckled. The rose or pink is Lac de Garance again, same pigment, it's just a different preparation of the madder to give a much more vibrant pinky colour, and that to me is more of the red, a classical cool red. That's more like an alizarin crimson kind of colour. The next one is not for everyone. This is Carmine, or Lac de Cochineal, sorry, which is made from NR4 cochineal lake. Cochineal is an extract of an insect. It's not a beetle, it's a scale bug that is a pest on cacti, so they have to be removed anyway, and they have a large amount of pigment in their bodies, so if you make an extract of the female ones, you can lake it and get cochineal, which is this wonderful carmine kind of colour, and you can make lovely mixes with this, as you'll see. That is the only product in this range that is animal based completely. Obviously they all contain honey and they all contain ox gall. Now honey is not vegan friendly. Ox gall some vegetarians are not happy with, because for ox gall you have to kill the animal to get it. It's bile from a cow, so it's abattoir waste. It's not, you know, they don't have like bear bile in China with tubes coming out of the cows. They do just collect it in the abattoir and purify it, and you can get synthetic ox galls, but these paints use the real thing if it's there. I don't remember, but I think it's there. So I don't know if this, I would not say this range is vegan friendly because of the honey, but there is one paint that the vegetarians may wish to avoid because it uses whole insects. The next one is the Violet Lac de Campeche, which is made from the logwood tree, which is a tree found in Central America, and this is NBK1 logwood lake. It is a really gorgeous midnight violet, and that's the one that has the light fastness 5 on the blue wool scale. Okay, the others are all pretty much 6. Next is the blue, which is indigo, and this is NB1. Gorgeous, gorgeous indigo. It's got really nice granulation. It's really finely ground as well, which I've found like the Wallace Seymour indigo is almost lumpy. This is a really nice preparation. There is this really gorgeous grey I did not think I would like, but I really enjoyed this grey. It has a slight pink undertone that you can't quite see. It's Lac de Fraisier. In French, fraise is a strawberry, fraisier is the strawberry plant, and this I think comes from either the roots or the leaves of the plant, and it is, well, I'll talk about where she sources them from in a minute, but it's actually basically recycled waste from the food industry. Really beautiful grey, really beautiful brown to go with it. This is a sort of an umber brown, and this is a walnut based ink. Sorry, this is a walnut based paint, and obviously many of you are familiar with walnut brown inks. This uses Lac de Noyer, which is walnut lake, and that is mostly comprised of juglone, which is the main pigment in walnuts that has then been laked. Really, really beautiful, and it's got a lot of texture to it. Now we get into the greens, and I really love this dark green. I didn't like it at first, but once it dried it looked really, really pretty. This uses Lac de Reine des Prés, and Lac de Reine des Prés is, in French, the lake of the Queen of the Meadows, but in English it's Lake of Meadowsweet. That's the plant that is used to make it. It's a really gorgeous green. And there is another green, like this is dark green, and then the light green. The light green is also Lac de Reine des Prés, but it also contains indigo. This one is Lac de Reine des Prés alone. This one also has indigo added, and the indigo is not a lake, I should say. Indigo is naturally insoluble. So now into the yellow, Lac du Solidage, which is Goldenrod Lake. Really, really, really pretty colour. I don't know if I can really zoom on that. Look at that. I mean, it's got such nice texture and natural variation, but they're lovely, soft, muted colours. Now into the oranges, Lac du Cosmos. Cosmos Lake, made from the flowers of the cosmos, which many people have in their gardens. Many people have pink ones. This is from one of the yellow or orange ones. And the dark orange, finally, Lac de Thym. This is made from thyme, and it does smell of thyme when you open the tube. None of the others smell, interestingly, and I know Winsor & Newton Rose Madder smells really strongly of the Rose Madder plant. These ones don't. I don't know the entire reasons why that is, but the thyme does smell, and this is dark orange, and this is your kind of burnt sienna kind of colour. So those are the colours. I'm just going to kind of do a little aside for the people that are interested in where they come from, how they're manufactured, that kind of thing, because that is important. Some of these are made from things that Anne-Sylvie Godot grows herself. Others are things that she forages, and others are things that she buys. So it's kind of a combination of different plants. And I was scribbling down the details so I wouldn't forget them. The madder plant, Rubia tinctorum, which has been used as a clothing dye since at least 1500 BC. There's evidence of it at paintings on walls at Pompeii and Corinth in Roman Greece. It was a medicinal plant in the 1500s. Although it has no known medicinal use now, it's been tested, it doesn't do anything really. And that has all those different pigments in that I mentioned earlier. And the name, the binomial Latinate name, simply means the red dye-coloured plant, for want of a better way of saying it. Carmine or Carmine comes from Dactylopius coccus, which is a scale bug, the cochineal bug, which is a cactus pest. It's been being used as a fabric dye for over 500 years, and those of us who were alive in the 80s will remember cochineal food colouring before most countries banned it. And the bodies of the female cochineal beetle are about 20% carminic acid, which lakes beautifully with aluminium and calcium and will give you a carmine lake. And you can change the metal and get different shades of sort of how blue or how red it is. Logwood is Hematoxylum campechianum, which translates to hemato, blood, xylem, wood, campechianus, from Campeche, which is an area of Mexico. And in histology, the stain, which most histologists call hematoxylin, the correct pronunciation is probably hematoxylin, given that that is hematoxylum, not hematoxylum. And hematoxylin or hematoxylum isn't actually coloured. If you oxidize it, you get something called hematein, and the logwood lake is hematein lake. So it's a lake of a common histology stain. And if you've ever had a tissue preparation done or a tumour examined or anything horrible like that, usually you'll see on the report an H&E stain was done, and that's hematoxylin and eosin. It's a very common stain for DNA and nuclear material. It's been used as a dye for many years, but other members, particularly of hematoxylum, are used as decorative wood because the wood of the tree is kind of purple. And I didn't sort of say where these come from. So the Rubia tinctorum is grown in Belgium on Anne-Sylvie's land. These two, I believe, are both bought in as extracts already made, I think from, little projects. Certainly I know the hematoxylum extract comes from a little project in Guadeloupe that is very kind of organic and very environmentally conscious, and that's one thing that I really liked about these paints. The indigo comes from a plant that Anne-Sylvie has on her notes and her website as Polygonum tinctorum, which the botanists at the moment would call Persicaria tinctoria, because it moved genus a number of years ago. Persicaria just means peach-like, tinctoria coloured. I think that's because the leaves of the plant resemble those of a peach tree. And this is often known as Chinese indigo. It was the original source of indigo before Indigofera started being used, and that's what in most indigo these days that's extracted from plants comes from Indigofera rather than this plant. But this plant will grow in Europe, so Anne-Sylvie grows her indigo, I believe, and has huge amounts of it because large amounts are needed to get a small amount of pigment. That's one thing you have to kind of remember. The strawberry plant, Fragaria cross ananassa, which is a hybrid. The name simply means Fragaria in Latin is strawberry, ananassa is pineapple because of, if you actually look at them, they look kind of like little pineapples on the plant. and the leaves of that plant, and I think possibly the roots too, are used to make the pigment. The walnut is not a nut, it's a drupe in botany, and you'll be familiar with the brain-like looking thing on the inside, but the outside is a kind of big fleshy ball, and that outside husk is what's used to make the pigment. Juglans nigra is the name of the tree, and juglans is a contraction of Jupiter and glans. Glans meaning an acorn or a nut. So it's the nut of Jupiter, i.e. in Rome that would have been the finest nut effectively, and nigra meaning black. This is one of the ones that's kind of recycled, and so is the strawberry. With the strawberry, I believe she gets waste from, like, you know, you pick the strawberries off the plant, she uses the rest of the plant. The walnut, the husks are actually kind of scavenged around hedgerows in Belgium and around walnut orchards because they fall on the floor. So they're actually collected up and used. They're not, it's not cultivated specifically for that. The next plant is the meadowsweet, Filipendula ulmaria, which is the hanging thread that is elm-like. Elm-like because of the shape of the leaf, and hanging thread because of the tubers that grow underground as part of it. It's been used for many, many years for flavouring drinks. It's associated to the woman of flowers in Welsh mythology, whose name I can't actually pronounce because Welsh is not a language I have any grip over. And it was popular in the Middle Ages when they used to throw rushes and plants on the floor. Herbs would often be thrown down because you walk on them and you get a nice smell. And meadowsweet was one of those, although the paint does not actually smell of meadowsweet at all. Solidago canadiensis is the goldenrod, which is named from... Solidago is a corruption of consolida, which is the Latin name for the comfrey, so it's kind of comfrey-like. Canadiensis from Canada. And Solidago canadiensis is mostly used as an animal feed and as a traditional medicine for kidney stones and for sore throats. And I think that one she collects waste from when the leaves are used to make essential oil. She gets the flowers, I think. I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm sorry, my memory's really bad and I just don't entirely remember which bits she gets from where. The last couple, thyme is Thymus vulgaris, which is obviously the culinary herb. Very strong antimicrobial. If you gargle with an infusion of thyme, it's very, very good for sore throats. It's a very good antibacterial. And if you're making your own jelly plate for jelly printing, boil thyme in the water first, and then it won't go off, because the thymol, which is the alcohol found in thyme, will actually prevent bacterial growth on your jelly plate, and it will last a little bit longer, which is obviously a good thing. And the whole plant is used to make that dark orange. And then the bright orange is Cosmos sulphureus, cosmos meaning ordered, because the flowers are very, very regular in shape. I sketched one just there. And sulphureus, sulphury, because of that bright yellow colour. And that has no use other than being an ornamental plant, really. So that was a quick whiz through traditional uses of some of the plants and what they look like. So let's have an actual look at these gorgeous paints. You've seen them swatched out. I wanted to see what will they do. So given that these are based on flower pigments, they're not our usual kind of deal. It's not the kind of stuff we usually work with. One of the first things that I wanted to find out from them was how they would behave if I mixed them into different things. So let's just pull out from the swatches the light green and the purple, because they were the ones I used first of all, and I'll compare them against swatches when we look at them. So the first thing I did was I mixed a couple of them into gouache, because I wanted to see, can you tint gouache with them? And yeah, you can. So that's the paint. These are mixed with gouache. These are mixed with Winsor & Newton Designer's Gouache in zinc white, so that's a professional grade, designer's grade gouache. You get a really, really nice soft violet and a really, really nice creamy green there. I think these would be really useful mixed into gouache, and you could mix them into gouache in pans with a bit of glycerin to stop them cracking, and then you can make a gouache set out of these. I don't remember the exact proportions, but I remember something like 17% zinc white mixed into a watercolour will turn it into a gouache effectively. You can find the exact figures online, but you could make these into gouache if you want to use gouache rather than watercolour. So I wanted to see how they fared as a wash. This is the pink done as a standard wash. Not very good wash, but just as a standard wash. Using that standard same brush all the way through this, that icon brush. And then I tried it with a bit of Oxgall added, and that was Daler and Rowney Oxgall, which is not my favourite. I prefer the Winsor & Newton one, but you know, that one was cheaper on that day. That's what I picked up. You do get a much smoother, much softer effect. This one has a tendency to not granulate, but have a little bit of texture to it, and this one smoothed out very much. I then tried, and I was obviously just playing with colour here at the same time, I then tried, this is the control with the Indigo Blue, and this is with gum arabic added, and I overdid the gum arabic a little bit, so it's a little bit shiny, but what you do see is a much more vibrant colour. I think you can see that over, let me use something with contrast so you can see it. So if you look at this one is almost, you know, kind of you can see the paper through it. It's quite a thin wash, but with a bit of gum arabic it sits on top of the paper a little better and you get more vibrancy, just as you would with any other watercolour, so that was nice. Then I wanted to try adding a bit of texture, and one way you can add texture that is a bit unorthodox is to add a little bit of black brusho. Brusho is a kind of form of watercolour that you can buy as crystals, and those crystals are a mixture of pigments coated onto something like gum arabic, and you may